So today, we're going to start the next section, or I'm going to try to start the next section, series on knowing God, and this should only take us 1 or 2 Sundays to work through this portion, I believe. But before we get started, I did want to make a comment about the trumpets. Does anybody no one's really interested, okay. But I did want to point out, and I'm sure some of you made this connection, in Numbers chapter 10, and it is true that, as Pastor said, Numbers 1 through 10 are very much of an introduction to the book of Numbers. And there's a distinct change in Numbers 11, which, Lord willing, we'll see next week. So sometimes, it's hard to preach these passages. It's hard to try to gather all this information into one place, present it in such a way that people would be actually interested to hear it, and then apply it to our Christian lives today. That's no easy task. So since Pastor's not in here, I'll just say, encourage him through this time, because he might feel like he's wandering in the wilderness sometimes when he's up there in the pulpit. But the silver trumpets, when it says in chapter 10, make 2 silver trumpets of hammered work, you shall make them, and you shall use them for summoning the congregation and for breaking camp. And he says, and when both are blown, all the congregations shall gather themselves together. Okay, so if I say when the trumpet sounds, everyone is going to be gathered together, what does that make you think of? Do I even want to know what you said? Do I even want to know what you said? We'll go with Paul's answer of the rapture. Don't play word association games with Joanne. The 1 Thessalonians 4. Okay, so 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul is using the same analogy. He's using actually the same wording from Numbers 10. And it's over the question of, people who have died in the Lord, what'll happen when the rapture occurs? What happens to them? And so Paul says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, I think the old King James says ignorant, about those who are asleep, that is, those who have died, that you may not grieve as others who do not have any hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Okay, and those who are alive, who remain, will be raised next. So this imagery that Paul is using comes right from Numbers 10, because the trumpet sounds, the people are gathered, or the trumpet sounds, and this group is gathered, then this group is gathered, called out. So the people on the east go out, the tabernacle and the Levites go out, the next group goes out. Paul says the same thing's going to happen when the Lord comes back for us. There's going to be a trumpet. Now, whether that's literal or figurative, but there's no reason not to take it literally either. But we're going to hear the trumpet sound, and we're going to be gathered together with the Lord. And those who have died in Christ go first, and then we go. But it's going to happen so fast. It's not like in the wilderness when 100,000 people have to get up and move, and you sit there and wait. Like if you're boarding an airline and you're like the second section, okay, everyone, we're doing the boarding now, and everyone gets up and walks, and you still sit there because there's no reason to get up and stand in line because you're just going to wait there, right? You just wait. Okay, so it's not going to be like that. It's going to happen so fast, we won't know the difference. But the imagery is exactly the same for Numbers 10. And that's where Paul's taking it from. So there's something very interesting there that Paul does. Okay, I still want this. All right, that was free. So Christian worldview, this is kind of our outline. We talked about introductions and definitions first. We talked about the fear of the Lord. We took that from Proverbs. Then today we'll start talking about knowing God, and then next time world order, and then imagination. And then I've actually started doing some work on what comes after that. We'll take a couple weeks to talk about some things, more applying it to our everyday situation. Now, I mentioned that when we're talking about Christian worldview, it's like a plate of spaghetti. Did I use that illustration? I think I did. It's like you've got a bunch of long spaghetti noodles, maybe, I don't know which, lo mein noodles, is that the right one? That you've got a big pile of them and they're all mixed together. And you grab the end of one and you're trying to find the end of it, right? And it's all mixed in with the other ones. And so we're taking a logical approach to this topic, but we have to kind of make a little headway, and then we have to kind of back up a little bit, and then make a little progress and head back a little bit, and then we'll bring it all together at the end. So you have to be patient with me, I guess, as we look at that. So by way of review a little bit, we talked about the fear of the Lord last time, and this is one of the slides that I showed last time, just showing Proverbs 1 through 9. And again, Proverbs 1 through 9 is a unit. It's a one literary unit that's to be read together. And the fear of the Lord shows up at least 6 times in those first 9 chapters. And it begins with the first reference, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and the last reference is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And then we saw that in chapters 1 and 2, the person who fears the Lord is someone who loves wisdom and is seeking out wisdom, desires wisdom, has their heart set on wisdom. And in Proverbs 3 and 8, there's a negative side to it. This person who seeks wisdom, who loves wisdom, hates evil and is turning away from it. Okay, so there's kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. If I'm turning away from evil, I'm desiring wisdom. And of course, that is very much the picture of repentance, right? We're turning away from our sin and turning to Christ's righteousness. It's the same idea. So what we came up with at the end of that is that there's something when we talk about what worldview is, or what Christian worldview is, there is something more than simply facts or simply things that we do that contribute to the fear, contribute to our worldview. And we use the fear of the Lord to illustrate this. So, because of that, I tweaked a little bit our definition of worldview, which I said I would be doing throughout the course of our lectures. So, before we said all of the beliefs one has that affects how one lives in the perceived world, I had the word perceived in there. I put a little star next to beliefs, and I took out the word perceived. And someday I'll explain why in more detail, those things. But I said including, and before I had some examples here. Okay, so I changed these examples to statements. And I said everything we know to be true, and yes, we could say everything we think to be true, because we could be wrong, right? So we think something is true, but we might find out that we're wrong. Everything that we do that is right, and this is morality, right versus wrong behavior, and everything we feel, and I used that word feel last week, talking about the fear of the Lord, that we were talking about respect, we were talking about reverence, we were talking about awe, we're talking about all these things which are actually feelings, and I introduced the term noble affections. These things are historically called noble affections, and so I'm probably introducing you to a new word. I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence, but most people don't walk around talking about noble affections these days. Unless they're, read a lot of Jonathan Edwards or something. So that's what I've taken. Our worldview, again, is something that is inside of us that helps us to function in the world. It gives us sense in the world. And some of the things that make sense in the world to us are things that we know. Some of the things that make sense of the world are things that we do, and some of the things that help us make sense of the world are actually our feelings, or our affections, or our desires, which we'll talk about in another lecture. So we've gone up to this point, and now I have to hang it. I just have to leave it hanging there for a little while, because we need to cover some other ground so we can make more sense out of this. So if you have questions, if you're still not sure, it's okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to this. All right. And then culture. And I didn't change anything here, but that reminds me. This is just by way of reminder. Culture is the way a group of people with a shared worldview work out their beliefs in the world. Now, I did tweak that a little bit because I had a very technical definition in there, and I thought I would put something in there that was a little bit helpful, maybe. But culture is the way a group of people gather together who have a shared worldview work out their beliefs in the world. And there's different kinds of culture that people talk about. This is a book that I'm currently reading, and it's by Russell Kirk. If Russell Kirk passed away in 95, but if you're interested in conservative politics, not Republican politics, but conservative politics, you want to read Russell Kirk. I'll just put that out there. You can start with his biography if you want, which is called Sword of Imagination. But he was a thinker. That's what he was, and very interesting to read. Very easy to read. Not real highfalutin. But in this particular book, he's talking about America's British culture. And it's just a series of essays, 6 essays, of him tracing America's roots in different areas, cultural roots in different areas, to the British people. And I thought I would read just one quotation from this. Oh, I didn't have my bookmark in it, though. Bad teacher, bad teacher. No, it wasn't that chapter, it was this one. Yeah, it's this one. Because he's talking about religion in America, in the founding of America. And de Tocqueville. Oh, here we go. I'm getting closer. So de Tocqueville wrote a book. He was a Frenchman, obviously by his last name, who came to the United States in the 1800s and talked about how wonderful America was. Democracy in America is what I think was the title of the book. And it's very interesting to read his observations of America and during that time. And he makes a series of observations about our habits, our mores, our morality. And I'm not finding the quotation that I wanted, so I'll see if it comes to me later. Instead of wasting your time. But It's in there somewhere. I mean, I can read you other passages, but I just don't see the one in particular that I was looking for. Okay. All right, so I'll give that up. We'll see if I remember it. Okay. So culture, we'll come back to that one. We'll have time to come back to that. All right, so today, I want to ask the question, how do we know in general? So when we're talking about knowledge, which we were a little bit in Proverbs, the question is, how do we know certain things? When we talk about knowing facts, knowing right and wrong, knowing what the fear of the Lord is, things like that, how do we know? How do we know anything? We have facts, we have things that we do, and we have people. So if I were to say, if you had an interest, maybe you have an interest in something. Paul, do you have an interest in anything? Other than Joanne. That's a good answer. It wasn't the one I was looking for, but it's probably the right answer.
Let's say sports.
Okay, sports. Any sport in particular?
College basketball.
College football, college basketball.
Okay, college sports. If I asked you, like, teams, could you give me, like, who teams are that play?
Gophers.
Minnesota Gophers play? Okay, do you know, like, people who play on the team?
Well, last year we had a kid from Marshall that played.
Okay, so last year there was a Marshall kid that played on Gophers. Usually, so when somebody knows, is interested in something, they can often give you a lot of details, a lot of facts about that thing, right? So if you're in school and there's a subject that you're interested in, you probably spend more time in that subject than you do in other subjects, right? When my first semester in seminary, I had 6 classes, and one was the senior level Greek class. So my first year I was in the senior level Greek Hebrew classes because I had had Greek and Hebrew previously. And that class was very enjoyable. It was only 2 credits out of the, I forget how many I had, 16 or something. But it took up like half of all my time. So I had six classes, I think it was, and one class took up half of my time, 50% of my study time. Now, part of it was the workload of the class, but part of it was I enjoyed it and I wanted to do well in it. So I put the time in. So I had one class I spent all this time. Now, I didn't fail all the other classes, but I spent most of my time and energy in this one. Because I did. How many did I fail? I don't believe I failed any.
You said you didn't fail all.
Oh, right. Yeah, I didn't fail all of them. No, I didn't fail any of the other ones. I actually did fairly well at that semester. The class I should have done the best in, I actually got the lowest grade. So I actually got a B+ in Hebrew, senior Hebrew that year. But anyway, when you know something about something, it could be birds. You talk to little kids about, dinosaurs, and they know a lot. Like these, are you smarter than a 5th grader type things? Because these kids they're in whatever they enjoy, and they'll just learn all they can about it. And it'll be just usually one thing. They like birds, they learn all this stuff about birds. Or they like, Sophia, our oldest, was into natural history stuff. She collected, dead bodies of animals and feathers and stuff like that, and had her own little natural history museum. And she could tell you, all about it. We would go to natural history museums, and she could, talk about all this stuff when she was very little. So when we want to learn about a subject, if you just want to learn about a topic, then what do you have to do? What are some of the things you have to do to learn, something interests you, and you want to learn more about it?
Ask questions.
Okay, ask questions.
Read.
Okay, read. But it should be a similar exercise. When you're reading, you're asking questions and you're looking for answers from reading.
Study to show yourself approved.
Okay, study. Who are you asking questions from?
Somebody who knows more.
Okay, someone who knows more, hopefully. I was just waiting. All right, so what we try to, we can read a lot, we can study a lot, we can listen to people who know more than us, we can talk about things. This is why, Pastor talked about reading a lot and reading widely. This is, one reason I was reading this book was actually for this class. We try to gather as much information about something. Now, why would you begin studying something in the first place? Because you're interested in it, right? It's, at least at the beginning, it seems interesting, right? And then as you study more about it, you might find that it's not so interesting, or you might continue to learn more and more and more. They always say that when you write your dissertation, you will hate your topic by the time you're done, because it seemed very interesting at the beginning, but after you spend hundreds of hours on it, it's not interesting anymore. It loses your interest. So you have to choose something that you want to invest all that time in. What about if you're learning a new skill? If we talk about deeds. If you're learning a new skill,
You have to do it.
okay, so part of learning a new skill is actually doing it. Can you learn it from,
YouTube.
yeah, you can learn it from YouTube. Now, YouTube is great these days because, for my generation, if something's broke in the house, I just go find the YouTube video. My daughter says, oh, I've got a headlight out. Look at YouTube, see how to change it for your car. That doesn't mean that you can do it. It doesn't mean that you have the right tools. They make it look really easy. In fact, I had an issue with a seal on my tractor, transaxle seal, and they're like, oh, this is really easy. You pop the tire off, you just stick a screwdriver in there, you grab out the old seal, you put in the new seal, and you're done. Could not get that old seal out of there for anything. I am fairly well convinced they put like rubber cement or something on that, hold that seal in place. And then that seal, the new seal that I finally did get in there, it's bad, and I have to replace it again. And same thing, stick the screwdriver in there, pop out the old one, stick in the new one, you're all good to go. I could not get that old one out of there. So Daryl says, well, let me take a look at it. Okay, so Daryl looks at it, comes back, yeah, it's all done. Well, how'd you get that old seal out of there? Oh, I stuck a screwdriver in there and I just popped it right out, and then I just put the new one in and it was done. I'm like, I tried that several times and it never worked for me. He's like, oh, well, you probably just didn't, do this or that, whatever. Okay, so I tried, but the YouTube didn't work. Practice, okay, so Dave said practice helps you learn a new skill. So you have to do it, but you have to keep doing it, right? To build the skill. What else do you need with practice to help you make sure that you're doing it right? What? A good teacher. And a good teacher is going to correct you, right? So if your kids ever took music lessons, they can practice and practice and practice, and they might not get any better, right? They can keep trying, give it the old college try, but it doesn't work for them, even though they're practicing. And it's usually one of two things. For me, it was, I didn't really have a desire to improve. For other people, you don't have someone to correct you, who come along and slap your knuckles with a ruler and say, no, curve your fingers, or, play with your fingertips, or whatever. One of the things during COVID, we're all stuck at home, and everyone's learning new hobbies. So I got some woodworking equipment and hand tools, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I was making a mess out of everything. Some of it was practice. Keep going, keep going, keep going. But the one thing that and YouTube, the one thing that I missed was someone who could stand next to me and say, no, not like that, like this. That's what I was missing, so it takes me longer to learn something. I need someone to be able to correct me, and I have to accept the correction. It goes back to that whole thing. If I'm doing something and a good woodworker comes along and says, no, not like that, like this, and I say, oh, I know, and I keep doing it the same way, I haven't learned anything. I've rejected that, and according to Proverbs, I've been kind of a fool. So when we're learning how to do something or a skill, we do need practice, but we also need correction. We need training and we need correction, which is again very similar to the 2 Timothy passage that Carl alluded to. Okay, so what about people? How do you know people?
Spend time with them.
Okay, but anyone, I felt like when I was thinking about this, I thought, what's the number one answer that everyone is going to give at the same time? Yeah, you have to spend, except for Joanne, you have to spend time with people to get to know them. Okay, so that's a given, but what happened, how does that work? We spent time getting to know the facts and getting to know the deeds too. What's different?
Communication.
Okay, communication. So what are you communicating?
Ask questions. Ask
Oh, asking questions?
questions, yeah. I don't know where you grew up. I don't know where you were born. I don't know about your family, how many siblings you had.
Okay, so we're getting to know them by asking them questions, but where they're from, their family, things like that.
Or saying, what are you thinking?
Okay, what are you thinking?
What are you thinking?
Not what were you thinking? What were you thinking? Okay, what are their thoughts about something? Or just if they're quiet, you want to know what they're
I
thinking?
just had somebody in mind.
You had somebody in mind that you were wondering what they were thinking?
Yeah.
Willingness to be transparent.
Okay, to be transparent.
Often you have a shared interest. Gather around.
Okay, so sometimes it's a shared interest. So sometimes when you're talking to people and asking them questions like that, you're almost looking for that shared interest, right? Oh, you too. I had one of the people that works in our education department at the university had a question for me, and sometimes I'm not in my office, so I bring my phone around with me, and if I get a message in the office will send me a message on my phone that says, hey, somebody stopped by and wants you to talk to them. So then while I'm out, away from my office, I'll just go to their office. And I prefer talking to people in person. I don't enjoy email very much at all. And so I'll stop by. So I stopped by, and anyway, she had, while we were talking, she had music on in the background, and it was kind of distracting me because I could hear just enough that I was starting to make out what it was, but not enough to help me figure out what it was. So I was trying to pay attention to what she was telling me. But afterwards I said, you have your music on? She goes, yeah. I said, well, what are you listening to? And then the song had changed, and I recognized the next song for sure. And she goes, oh, it's just this Christian piano arrangements, light Christian piano arrangements, and of hymns. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I recognize this one. I said, my mind was going to the previous one. I was trying to pick out just enough where I was trying to pick out what hymn it was. And so then that just opened a conversation, about her religious background and where she's from and where they're at now and why she would be listening to this Christian music and that type of thing, trying to get to know them better. So it takes time and conversation. We're trying to figure out maybe what they're thinking or what they're thinking about, or what they think about something, what else, maybe what their interests are. How does that help us? How do those things help us to know someone? Because, in theory, so what I did after 27 years of marriage, I wrote down everything that I knew about Jennifer and put it in a file. And so if Joanne said, Eric, tell me about your wife, I would say, here, just read this report. It'll tell you everything you need to know. Now, is that going to help Joanne know my wife as a person? No. Karen is like, absolutely not. Well, why not? What's the difference?
She's not seeing her face to face. She needs personal contact.
Okay, personal contact. And what does that give her? How does it help?
Your body language.
Body language.
Everybody has a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, people have different perspectives. So this is my perspective on my wife. Now, it really wasn't, by the way. Don't go rifling through my briefcase after. But people have different perspectives. And as we're talking about Christian worldview, one of the things is we say we get to know a person is we're trying to kind of find out what those perspectives are sometimes. But again, there's an interest. We're interested in someone. We would say it's best to be interested in someone not for what you get from that relationship, but what you can give into that relationship. So, Paul, when I asked you at the beginning, what is something you're interested in? I think that was the question, right? Do you have any interests? You said, yes, your wife is right? So what did you mean by that? We kind of chuckled at the beginning, but...
You didn't write a file.
I got my file at home.
Your file's at home.
Do that, or was that just...
It was just an illustration. Yeah, she's like, oh, poor Jennifer.
So the question is,
When I said, what...
and I said Joanne.
Yes.
Then
And then I said, why did you answer that way?
why did I answer that way? Because it was an appropriate answer. It was an appropriate answer, but, Joanne's my wife and my friend, and, we spend time together. So I'm just